Every man carries emotional triggers. Small, invisible switches buried under layers of confidence, silence, and self-control. Most women never notice them because men are masters of disguise. They smile when they're uncomfortable, they joke when they're hurt, and they stay quiet when they're disappointed. But that silence doesn't mean he's unaffected. It means he's protecting something deeper. His ego, his pride, and the small piece of him that still wants to feel understood without needing to explain himself. When you learn to read those hidden emotional triggers, when you master yourself enough to see past his surface, everything about your connection with men changes. You stop guessing what he feels. You stop trying to pull emotions out of him. Instead, you observe, calmly, confidently, knowing exactly what moves him, what breaks him, and what makes him chase you in ways he can't explain. Because the truth is, men don't fall for beauty. They fall for emotional resonance. They fall for the woman who can touch the parts of them they never show. And those triggers aren't physical. They're psychological. They're moments that remind him of his worth, his identity, and his peace. When you know how to activate them, not manipulate, but mirror them, you become unforgettable. You become the woman he feels safe around and challenged by at the same time. The difference between a woman he dates and a woman he can't let go of is her awareness. The first one reacts to his distance. The second one understands it. The first one takes his silence personally. The second one studies it and responds with patience, mystery, and grace. That's what mastery looks like. Not control, but emotional calibration. In this video, we'll break down the 9 emotional triggers every man hides, the ones he'll never admit but always responds to. You'll learn what makes him open up, what makes him protective, what makes him regret losing you, and what makes him chase you long after you've stopped trying. But here's the secret. You can't use these triggers effectively until you've mastered yourself. Because men don't respond to manipulation. They respond to energy. The moment your calm matches his chaos, your presence starts to rewire him. You become the mirror he can't look away from, because through you, he finally sees the man he wants to be. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the most powerful woman isn't the one who speaks the loudest. It's the one who listens with awareness, moves with grace, and knows exactly which emotional strings to touch, without ever forcing a reaction. Because once you master yourself, he can't hide his triggers anymore. He reveals them to you, willingly. Let's dive in. Trigger number 1. When you respect his silence instead of filling it. Men live in silence because it's the only place they feel safe. In that quiet, they process, they rebuild, and they hide the parts of themselves they don't trust anyone else to handle. Most women, driven by emotion and empathy, see that silence and panic. They think distance means disinterest. They try to fill the space with words, questions, or reassurance, not out of neediness, but from fear of losing connection. But here's what most don't realize. When you try to pull a man out of his silence, you're not connecting with him. You're interrupting his process. For a man, silence isn't rejection. It's self-preservation. It's his way of regaining balance when his emotions threaten to overpower his control. And in those moments, the woman who understands this, who doesn't force conversation, who doesn't beg for clarity, who simply gives him space with peace, becomes rare in his world, because she doesn't challenge his masculinity. She honors it. Every man carries invisible battles he'll never talk about. Expectations, pressure, fears of failure. When you respect his silence, you're telling him, I trust you to handle your world. That single, silent message creates a deeper bond than any words ever could, because suddenly you're not part of his noise. You're part of his stillness. And for a man, that's intimacy. You have to understand, men don't always need fixing. They need space to restore their own balance. The woman who tries to make him talk will exhaust him. The woman who sits beside him quietly, confident in her energy, will center him. That's the difference between emotional noise and emotional intelligence. Respecting his silence also communicates power. It shows him that you don't depend on constant validation to feel secure. And that stability is what pulls him back toward you again and again. When he sees that your peace remains untouched by his withdrawal, something inside him relaxes. He feels safe, not because you chased him, but because you didn't. Ironically, that's when he starts to open up. The same man who resisted questions will suddenly start talking on his own. He'll begin to share, not because you demanded it, but because you gave him space to arrive there by choice. And when he finally does, you'll notice something different in his tone. It's calmer, more grounded, more genuine. This is the first emotional trigger men can't hide. When a woman respects his silence, she becomes his sanctuary. Because in a world where everyone demands his attention, the one who gives him peace becomes unforgettable. So the next time he goes quiet, don't panic. Let the silence breathe. Let your calm do the talking. Because the woman who understands the language of silence holds a power over him no words could ever match. Trigger number 2. When you challenge him without shaming him. Every man craves a woman who believes in him. But what truly awakens him is a woman who challenges him. Not the kind of challenge that attacks or belittles, but the kind that quietly demands his greatness without ever questioning his worth. That balance between belief and boundary is one of the rarest energies a man can experience. It's also one of the most powerful emotional triggers you can awaken. Men are naturally driven by purpose. They measure their worth not by how they feel, but by what they achieve, what they can build, and what they can protect. When you challenge a man from a place of love, when you hold him accountable to his potential instead of criticizing his flaws, you activate something sacred in his psychology, the need to rise. But here's where most women lose him. They confuse challenge with correction. They think that pointing out what he's doing wrong will inspire him to improve. It doesn't. It activates his shame, not his strength. Because deep inside every man lives a silent fear, the fear of being seen as inadequate. And when you attack that fear, even unintentionally, he retreats. Not because he doesn't care, but because shame paralyzes action. A woman who masters this emotional trigger never attacks his pride. She feeds his purpose. Instead of saying, "You never listen," she might say, "I know you're capable of more than this." Instead of nagging, she plants seeds of belief. Instead of demanding, she invites. Her energy says, "I see your potential, and I'm not afraid to remind you of it." When you do this, he doesn't feel controlled. He feels inspired. You're no longer another critic in his world. You're the mirror that reflects his higher self. And men don't forget women who make them feel that way, because while others drain him, you awaken him. This kind of challenge builds emotional respect, the foundation of lasting attraction. He'll start to seek your input, your feedback, your presence, because he associates you with his strength, not his struggle. You become the calm voice in his mind that pushes him forward when he doubts himself. And that connection goes deeper than romance. It becomes spiritual. To challenge a man without shaming him is to speak to his soul. It's to see the warrior beneath the armor and remind him why he put it on in the first place. And once you learn that, he can't hide his reaction. He'll look at you differently, with a mix of respect, desire, and quiet awe, because you did what most never could. You made him feel powerful without making him feel small. That's how you earn a man's admiration, not by agreeing with everything he says, but by believing in everything he could be. Trigger number 3, when you stay feminine. Even during conflict. Every man expects tension in a relationship, but he doesn't expect grace in the middle of it. Most women, when they feel misunderstood or unheard, instinctively mirror masculine energy. They raise their voice, argue to win, or emotionally withdraw to protect themselves. But the truth is, no man feels safe when a woman becomes his rival. He might stay to argue, but internally, he's retreating. Because the feminine energy he was drawn to, the softness, the calm, the empathy, has turned into resistance. Men don't fear disagreement. What they fear is emotional chaos. When conflict arises and you stay composed, not passive but poised, something powerful happens inside him. He feels contrast. Your calm becomes magnetic. Your tone slows him down. Your silence makes him listen. And your restraint reawakens his respect. This is the emotional trigger most women never realize they hold. Grace under fire. A woman who stays feminine in conflict communicates power without force. She doesn't yell to be heard. She speaks to be understood. She doesn't demand respect. She embodies it. And that energy disarms a man completely. Because while he's used to defensiveness, you bring peace. While he's prepared for war, you bring warmth, and that shift makes him open up, not to defend himself, but to protect you. Staying feminine doesn't mean you accept disrespect or suppress your emotions. It means you express them with elegance, using tone, timing, and truth. You can say, "That hurt me," without making it an attack. You can hold your boundary without raising your voice. You can be strong without becoming hard. And when you do, you trigger something ancient in men, their instinct to protect rather than compete. This balance between strength and softness is rare. It requires emotional intelligence, not ego. Because when you master this, your calm doesn't mean weakness, it means control. Men are drawn to it because it reflects something they lack. It reminds them that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And when it whispers through a woman who knows her worth, it echoes in every part of his mind. You must understand, the feminine isn't just an energy. It's a language. It's the quiet confidence that says, "I can love you deeply without losing myself." And in moments of conflict, when you keep your grace, you remind him that your peace isn't conditional. It's chosen. That's what makes you unforgettable. A man may argue with 100 women who match his fire, but he'll never forget the one who stayed radiant in the middle of his storm. Because she didn't compete with his chaos, she calmed it. And that calm, that softness wrapped in strength, becomes his most powerful emotional trigger, the one that redefines what love feels like. Trigger number 4. When you admire his effort, not just his results. Every man lives with a silent pressure, the need to win. Society, family, his past, and even his own pride have programmed him to believe that his worth is measured by his results. But what most women don't see is the emotional weight behind that mindset, the self-doubt, the fear of failure, the constant comparison to other men. He might look calm, even arrogant on the surface, but deep down, he's always wondering if he's enough. And that's where this emotional trigger lies, in the space between his effort and his outcome. Because the truth is, men rarely get recognized for the process. The world praises success, but stays silent during struggle. So, when a woman acknowledges his effort, when she notices his consistency, his discipline, or even the small improvements he's making, something inside him softens. It's not just appreciation, it's validation at the deepest emotional level. Men don't fall for women who admire what they have. They fall for women who respect what they build. When you say, "I see how hard you're trying," or "I respect how you handle things," you're not inflating his ego. You're healing it. You're giving him a kind of recognition that he can't ask for, but deeply craves. And when he feels seen in that way, You stop being just another voice in his life. You become his safe place. Admiring his effort also communicates something rare: empathy. It shows him that you understand how heavy it can be to be a man in a world that demands perfection. And when he senses that understanding, his walls begin to lower. Because finally, he's found someone who doesn't just love the outcome. She loves the process that made him who he is. But here's the catch. Admiration must come from authenticity, not flattery. Men can feel the difference. When your praise comes from genuine observation, not manipulation, it hits deeper. It makes him want to keep growing, to keep earning that respect. You become his motivation, not his distraction. This emotional trigger also works silently. You don't have to say it every day. You show it through how you respond to his ambition, his pace, his vision. You don't rush him, you don't compare him, and you don't make him feel small for trying. Instead, you create emotional oxygen, space for him to breathe, fail, and rise again. And that's when something shifts. The man who once kept his struggles private begins to share them. Not because he's weak, but because he feels safe being imperfect around you. That's what real intimacy looks like, when his vulnerability meets your grace. Because a woman who sees his effort when the world only sees his results becomes unforgettable. She's not loving the trophy, she's loving the man who built it. Trigger number 5. When you make him feel chosen, not needed. Every man has felt the difference between being wanted and being used. On the surface, the two might look similar: affection, attention, closeness. But deep down, men can feel when a woman's energy comes from desire or from dependency. And that difference changes everything. When a woman needs a man to fill a void, to complete her, to validate her, to fix her, he might stay for a while, but he never truly invests. Because men don't bond through obligation, they bond through choice. The man who feels needed will eventually feel drained, but the man who feels chosen will rise to his best self. That's the emotional trigger most women never see. The power of selective energy. Men are drawn to women who have their own peace, their own rhythm, their own sense of fulfillment. When your happiness isn't dependent on him, he feels a strange mix of curiosity and respect. He doesn't feel like your purpose. He feels like your preference. And that distinction awakens his desire to earn his place beside you, not to maintain it out of guilt. The woman who makes him feel chosen is secure within herself. She doesn't chase attention, she embodies it. She doesn't demand love, she inspires it. Her presence doesn't say, "I need you to complete me." It says, "I'm whole and I want you to join me." That energy flips the dynamic completely. Instead of running after his affection, you draw him in, not with pressure, but with peace. And here's what's fascinating. Men are terrified of being emotionally trapped, but they crave being emotionally wanted. When you make him feel like a conscious choice, he starts viewing you as rare, because very few women give men the gift of voluntary connection. Most try to hold him. You simply let him stay. That freedom makes your love feel pure, not strategic. But the only way to make a man feel chosen is to master your own emotions first. Because if you attach from emptiness, your energy becomes heavy. But when you attach from abundance, your energy becomes magnetic. You don't seek love to escape loneliness. You share love because you already have peace. That's the kind of energy that men feel instantly. It's calm, confident, feminine, and unforgettable. When he senses that your world would still be beautiful without him, that's when he truly wants to be part of it. Because now, you're no longer competing for his attention. He's competing for your presence. You've become the woman who doesn't need a man to feel complete, yet makes every man want to be the one you choose. That's the emotional trigger he can't hide. Admiration mixed with desire. Because nothing humbles a man more than realizing he was chosen by a woman who didn't need him, but wanted him anyway. Trigger number 6. When you respect his boundaries instead of testing them. Most women don't realize that boundaries are not walls to a man. They're anchors. They're how he stays balanced in a world that constantly demands his strength, patience, and attention. Every man builds his boundaries out of experience, some from pain, some from purpose, and some from pure necessity. But when a woman keeps testing those limits just to feel reassured, she unknowingly does the very thing that pushes him away. Respecting a man's boundaries isn't submission, it's intelligence. It's the art of understanding that a man's need for space, order, or control doesn't mean he's rejecting you. It means he's protecting himself. Men crave emotional stability the way women crave emotional connection. So, when you respect the limits that help him maintain that stability, he doesn't see you as distant, he sees you as safe. Every man remembers the woman who honored his boundaries, the one who didn't guilt him for needing silence, who didn't demand access when he pulled back, who didn't use emotion to force closeness. Because that woman stood out from all the rest. She didn't take his boundaries personally. She understood that they weren't about separation. They were about structure. And men respect structure. The truth is, men constantly battle between their need for independence and their desire for connection. When a woman pressures that balance, he feels suffocated, but when she honors it, he starts letting her in naturally. The paradox is simple. The moment you stop forcing entry, he opens the door himself. Respecting his boundaries also communicates your emotional maturity. It shows him that you don't need to control the pace of connection to feel secure. You trust the rhythm, the timing, and his ability to return. That quiet confidence is magnetic because it says, I don't need to invade your space to stay important in your life. That message lands deeper than any declaration of love ever could. The woman who respects boundaries teaches a man something rare, that peace can exist inside love. She becomes a place of calm instead of chaos. And when he sees that your respect remains, even when he's unavailable, his trust begins to build, slowly but powerfully. Most women mistake boundaries as emotional distance, but boundaries are how men keep their emotional world from collapsing. If you honor that world, you don't lose access, you gain depth. He starts to realize that you're not trying to change his structure, you're trying to understand it. And once a man feels understood, he stops defending himself and starts connecting. That's the emotional trigger he can't hide. Because while attraction may start with beauty, it deepens with peace. The woman who respects his boundaries becomes the one he lets inside them. And once he lets you in, he'll protect you with the same strength he once used to protect himself. Trigger number 7. When you mirror his energy without losing your warmth. One of the deepest emotional triggers a man can feel is when a woman mirrors his energy. Not to punish him, but to teach him. Most women either overgive or withdraw completely when a man changes his behavior. They chase when he pulls away, and they shut down when he turns cold. But true feminine mastery lies in balance, the ability to match his energy without abandoning your softness. Men are intuitive, even when they pretend not to be. They can feel the shift in your tone, your pace, your energy. When you mirror him calmly, you send a message far more powerful than words. I see you, I feel the shift, and I will not chase what no longer moves toward me. That quiet awareness changes everything. Because now, he's no longer dealing with reaction, he's dealing with reflection. When a woman mirrors a man's energy correctly, she doesn't mirror his emotion, she mirrors his effort. If he invests, she invests. If he becomes distant, she becomes still. But her stillness isn't cold, it's composed. Her warmth doesn't disappear. It simply becomes private. She remains kind, but unavailable. Present, but not accessible. That emotional calibration makes a man question his own behavior without a single argument. Men are not inspired by confrontation, they're transformed by contrast. When he pulls away and you respond not with anxiety, but with peace, you create that contrast. Your calm energy confronts his inconsistency. He starts to notice that your world doesn't collapse without him. He realizes you're capable of giving affection, but only where it's reciprocated. And that realization wakes him up in ways no lecture ever could. But this kind of control doesn't come from playing games. It comes from emotional awareness. You can't mirror him from a place of resentment. You have to do it from understanding. You're not trying to match his mood. You're matching his maturity. That's the difference between manipulation and mastery. When a woman can mirror a man's energy while keeping her feminine warmth intact, she becomes unforgettable. Because she reminds him of something every man secretly craves: emotional harmony. A woman who can adjust without losing her essence is a rare mirror of strength and softness. She teaches him that love doesn't have to be dramatic to be powerful, that boundaries can coexist with compassion, and that she can pull back without punishing. And that's when the shift happens. He begins to chase again, not because you withheld affection, but because you rebalanced the energy. You stopped feeding what wasn't feeding you, and in doing so, you became magnetic. Because the truth is, a man doesn't fall for a woman who reacts to him. He falls for the woman who reflects him, challenges him, and still manages to radiate grace. When you can mirror without malice, detach without anger, and love without losing yourself, you become the standard he never knew he was searching for. In the end, understanding a man isn't about decoding his silence or mastering his reactions. It's about mastering yourself. Because the woman who knows her own energy doesn't chase emotions. She reads them. She doesn't demand attention. She inspires it. She doesn't fight for love. She attracts it naturally through balance, patience, and presence. Every man has emotional triggers, invisible places inside him that few ever reach. But those triggers don't respond to control, they respond to energy. When you move with calmness instead of chaos, understanding instead of ego, softness instead of strategy, you awaken something ancient in him, the need to protect, to connect, to stay. The secret isn't to overpower him, it's to mirror him while remaining anchored in your peace. Because when your energy becomes the calm he can't find anywhere else, he'll always come back to it. Not because you forced him, but because he feels safe there. And safety, for a man, is everything. He may be drawn to beauty, but he stays for serenity. He may admire confidence, but he's addicted to grace. He may test your patience, but he'll always remember the woman who met his storms with stillness. That's the power of feminine mastery. To influence without control, to lead without force, and to love without losing yourself. So remember, he can't hide his emotional triggers forever. They're not flaws, they're reflections. And the more you understand yourself, the more clearly you'll see them in him. When you respond from awareness, not fear, you become the mirror that reveals his truth, and the sanctuary that brings him peace.